People disappear in the Appalachian Mountains every year. Most are never found. Last October, my friends and I drove deep into Appalachia after hearing stories about screams echoing through the forests at night. At first we thought the locals were exaggerating to scare tourists away. None of us believed anything dangerous actually lived out there. But by the second night, we realized something in those mountains was hunting us. There were 4 of us on the trip. Me, Tyler, Mason, and Eric. Tyler constantly joked about horror stories online while Mason filmed everything for social media. Eric was quiet most of the time. I honestly just wanted a peaceful camping trip away from the city for a few days. The deeper we drove into the mountains, the darker the world became. Fog slowly rolled across the road while endless black trees surrounded us from every direction. Eventually our GPS completely stopped working. We hadn't seen another car in over an hour. That should have been our first warning. Around sunset, we stopped at a tiny gas station near the edge of the forest. The place looked abandoned except for one old truck parked outside. Inside, an elderly cashier stared at our camping gear silently before asking, "You boys heading into the mountains tonight?" Tyler laughed and said yes immediately. The old man's expression changed instantly. He slowly leaned closer across the counter and quietly whispered, "If you hear screaming after dark, don't follow it." Nobody responded after that. Even Tyler stopped smiling. Something about the way the man said it genuinely disturbed all of us. An hour later, we finally reached the hiking trail leading toward the campsite. The forest around us looked endless. Massive black trees covered every mountain in sight while fog drifted silently between them. At first the hike felt normal. We joked around and played music quietly while hiking deeper into the woods. But eventually, the forest became completely silent. No birds, no insects, no wind moving through the trees. Just silence so heavy it almost hurt your ears. Tyler finally muttered, "This place feels dead." Near dark, we found the abandoned ranger cabin mentioned on the map. The building looked ancient, half collapsed and covered in moss and vines. Its windows were shattered and the front door hung partially open. The darkness inside the cabin felt unnatural somehow. Like the light itself didn't want to enter. Mason immediately wanted to explore inside. The second we stepped through the doorway, a horrible smell hit us. Like mold mixed with something rotten. Broken furniture covered the floor while rusty hunting tools hung from the walls. But the strangest thing was the writing carved across the wood everywhere. Deep symbols had been scratched violently into the cabin walls. Some looked decades old, others looked fresh, almost recent. Eric slowly pointed his flashlight toward the back corner of the room. That's when we saw the pile of animal bones. At first we assumed the bones belonged to deer. Then Tyler noticed something beside them. A human boot, completely covered in dirt and dried mud. Nobody spoke after that. We quickly left the cabin and decided to set up our tents outside before it got completely dark. Around 11 p.m., we sat quietly around the campfire eating snacks and talking. That's when we heard the first scream somewhere deep in the mountains. The sound echoed through the trees for several seconds. It sounded almost human, high-pitched, desperate, and filled with pain. The scream suddenly stopped. Then the forest became silent again. Eric grabbed his flashlight immediately and pointed it toward the woods surrounding our campsite. Nothing was there. Mason nervously laughed and claimed it was probably just a mountain lion, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. About 30 minutes later, we heard the scream again. This time it sounded much closer. And something about it felt horribly wrong. Like someone trying to imitate a human scream without understanding how humans actually sounded. The noise echoed through the darkness while every one of us stared silently into the trees. Then Tyler suddenly whispered, "Did you hear that?" We all stopped talking immediately. Somewhere behind the trees, we heard heavy footsteps slowly circling around our campsite. Crunching leaves, breaking branches, always staying just beyond the firelight. Eric shouted into the darkness asking who was out there. The footsteps stopped instantly. Complete silence filled the mountains again. Then from somewhere deep in the woods, a woman's voice quietly whispered, "Help me." The voice sounded terrified, but something about it felt fake somehow. Almost forced. Mason grabbed his flashlight and started stepping toward the woods before Tyler suddenly grabbed his arm and pulled him back. That's when the woman's voice whispered again, "Please, help me." Then suddenly, The voice started laughing. Not normal laughter. It sounded distorted and broken. Like something trying to imitate human sounds after only hearing them once. Every one of us backed closer toward the fire without saying a word. Then Eric pointed toward the tree line. At first I couldn't see anything. Then I noticed a tall figure standing motionless between the trees, watching us. The thing looked almost human except its arms were unnaturally long, and its eyes reflected the firelight. Mason pointed his flashlight directly toward it. The second the light touched the figure, it stepped backward into the darkness impossibly fast. Then we heard something sprinting through the forest around us. Fast footsteps circled the campsite violently while branches snapped in every direction around us. Something was running around us in complete darkness. Tyler yelled for everyone to get inside the tents immediately. None of us argued. I barely slept that night. Every few minutes I heard footsteps slowly moving outside my tent. Sometimes they stopped directly beside me for several seconds before continuing again. It felt like something was studying us. Around 2:14 a.m., I woke up to whispering directly beside my tent wall. The voice quietly whispered, "I know you're awake." I froze completely. Then something slowly dragged its hand across the outside of the tent. The fabric bent inward inches from my face. I could hear breathing outside. Heavy breathing. Slow breathing. Then Tyler suddenly screamed from the other tent. All of us rushed outside immediately with flashlights. Tyler stood shaking beside the fire pit pointing toward the woods. He claimed something had been standing outside his tent watching him sleep. Then Eric noticed footprints surrounding the campsite. Long narrow footprints. Not human. Some circled our tents multiple times. Others stopped directly outside mine. That's when we heard screaming again. Except this time, it came from inside the abandoned cabin. The cabin door slowly creaked open by itself while we stared frozen beside the fire. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. And standing inside the darkness was the tall figure again. But now we could finally see its face. Its smile stretched unnaturally wide across its head. Too wide to be human. Mason immediately started recording with his phone while the creature stared directly at us. Then the thing tilted its head sideways and perfectly mimicked Tyler's voice. "Run." The creature suddenly sprinted into the forest on all fours faster than anything I'd ever seen. The movement looked completely unnatural. Almost spider-like. That was enough for all of us. We grabbed our gear and started running toward the hiking trail immediately. None of us looked back. While running through the mountains, we kept hearing footsteps chasing us through the trees beside us. Sometimes the sounds came unbelievably close before disappearing again into the darkness. Then somewhere behind us, we heard Eric screaming. When we turned around, he was gone. Only his flashlight remained lying in the middle of the trail. Tyler yelled for us to keep moving before whatever took him came back. We kept running until sunrise. Eventually we reached the ranger station and called police. Search teams spent 3 days looking for Eric but never found him. But 2 weeks later, Mason checked the footage he recorded that night. Near the end of the recording, another smiling figure slowly appeared behind us in the trees, watching us the entire time.